Christophe, you talked a lot about this journey. Can you add any more colour to Alpar's comments?
Well, yeah, well, Alpar really did a good job, but what I want to highlight is really that the sustainability of the program is critical, and you need over time just to make sure that this program is going to be sustainable. As I said before, it's not the flavor of the day. It's a journey. It's going to take a long time, and so you really need to go for a continuous optimization of your program based on where you are and your maturity. You have, of course, to fix what's not working, and you have to be pretty open about that, so that there is a forum to discuss what's not working and find ways to improve. And also, it's critical to promote what is working. And do all that stuff with a very positive mindset. So I'd say sustainability is really something that is going to be critical over time.
Thank you, Christophe. And really, we're almost at the end of today's discussion. Thank you all for your thoughts. I have just one question for all of you, and really it's for our listeners. What would you recommend to anyone listening today in terms of what steps they can take immediately as individuals to progress on a category management journey and start building that mindset that you've all talked about, and of course to break the Groundhog Day cycle? Chris, maybe if we hear from you first.
Yeah, sure. I think there should be a lot in here that anybody can benefit from, depending on where you are on that journey. So it's going to be different by individual. But if I had to pick one thing, I would say spend more time with your stakeholders. I challenge you to take a look at your calendar. Go look at the last 3 months of your calendar and really look at, with a critical eye, how much time are you truly spending with your stakeholders, really understanding their business and trying to align with them. So take a look at that, see what it reveals. But I think that's really where I would start. Always spend more time with your stakeholders, understanding their business needs.
Christophe?
Yeah, sure. In my case, well, I've been a category manager myself, and I've used the process. So what I want to say to people, it's really fun and rewarding. So it's a fun thing to implement category management. When you build and you implement a strategy over time to support your business, and you really see what it brings, this is really fun. So I want to finish with that fun note.
Alpar, do you have a fun note to finish off on?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I think, when whether you're a category manager, you're a procurement operations person, whether you're a CPO, I think the first thing you need to ask yourself and do a gut check on, where do you spend your time? When you look at any week that you have, where does your time go? And so that's number one, understanding where you spend your time. And if it's really reactive, if you're spending time on areas being responsive to the business, just reacting and putting fires out, that tells you that there's a lot of room for improvement and get into that mindset of being proactive, right? So that's number one. Number two is define the opportunity. So yes, definitely meet with your stakeholders and uncover opportunities, but do understand what is the potential value for your own domain, space, category that, if the model worked, that you can deliver. So what is the opportunity? Do an opportunity analysis and assessment of what the value could be. And then you have a business case then to go up, to your management and say, here's the opportunity, here's where I'm spending my time and only touching a piece of that because I don't have the bandwidth and maybe not the right tools and the right approach here. And I want to change that. And because this is a big potential to be not addressing. And to do that, that gives you the business case you need to take action, because these things doesn't happen on its own. Because I've seen many organizations, there's a willingness to change, there is, a good vision and a goal, but it does come with investment in terms of, putting the right level of resources, the tools, and the right, investment and knowledge and training. It all is part of the puzzle. And, but you have to take a role in actively promoting that and showing what the value is, and then pushing the journey of procurement to the next level.
Thank you so much, Alpar. We've got 15 minutes left to answer a few of the listener questions that have been coming in whilst we've been chatting, and there's been a lot of feedback, so thank you to everyone. Christophe and Christopher are going to stay on the line with us, and let me start with the question for you, Chris. Let's start with one of these. What is the main difference between category management versus procurement management?
Yeah, good question. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of questions that came in, so I'm not sure we're going to get through all of them. So rest assured, I think we'll get back to all the other individuals on their questions afterwards. But on this question, I think if you go back to the discussion we had about what it takes to make category management sustainable, we talked about category management really being the operating model for procurement. So I think my short answer to your question is there really is no difference. Category management, when done well, in our opinion, becomes the foundation for how you run your whole procurement organization. And that should make common sense. If you're thinking about what you're trying to do with category management is to be aligned closely with stakeholders, defining long-range strategies, and leveraging those strategies to drive the execution across the entire organization, then that should make common sense. So I think, again, the short answer is I don't see any difference at all.
Okay, well, why don't we take one of these to Christophe? When talking about shifting from developing to leading, how did you manage to remove the transactional and execution tasks? To which team did you pass them?
Yeah, the challenge is really to free up time from category managers. So it's really the first step we did was to take a fresh look at the list of activities, the transactional activities and all the execution tasks that were managed by the category manager. So it's to do some sort of a list and then decide which one you can pass on to someone else. And as I briefly explained in my previous discussion, we really, once we have listed those activities that were really transactional in nature, we then switch them to our outsource company, the WNS in this case, that was doing the transactional activities for us. So, and it's really a challenge to really describe those tasks and to manage properly the transition to that other organization, so that you can free up time from your category manager people, and then they can start doing more of the category management activity.
I guess following on from that, what did you outsource?
Oh, you mean specifically which activities?
Yes, which activities?
Yeah, well, I mean, as an example, there was a long list of activities like, loading prices into the system, maintaining vendor information, all sorts of, if I would have to summarize, more or less all activities that were linked to our ERP system and the transactions that the category managers were supposed to do in the ERP system. And another big bucket was to do some follow-up activities with vendors. So we allowed WNS to directly contact our vendors so that they could manage some of the issues that we were having, following up on confirmation of orders and things like that.
Wonderful. Thank you for going into that detail. Chris, now I'm going to read this next question because it's quite long and detailed, but here, let's go. One thing that has always confused me somewhat is how sourcing can ever be strategic, in inverted commas, as in strategic sourcing, if it does not address the objectives defined for category management on the slide. It seems in reality that as a profession, what we are saying is that the thing we call strategic sourcing is in fact rather tactical and reactive, and so unstrategic that we have to invent a new term, Catman, to address this. What are your comments?
Yeah, and I think the important thing is first we don't want to get caught in the vernacular. So you can call this whatever you want. I think that's fine. Many organizations are doing category management under the umbrella of strategic sourcing and doing it quite effectively. But I think it's important, as we discussed throughout here, is that there are separate functions in terms of what we're trying to do, and separating the planning and the strategy development portion of it, which we're calling category management here, from the execution portion. How are you executing that strategy? And here we're defining that as the source to contract supplier management execution activity through the rest of the cycle. Now, I would eliminate the word tactical. I think as procurement professionals, we should eliminate that term. I don't think there's much that we do is truly tactical, because we want everything that we're doing to align to that strategy. Let me give a little more detail on that, just kind of thinking about the differences between strategic sourcing or sourcing execution and category management. So just a couple things real quick. If you think about the scope of a typical sourcing project, it tends to be around, you think about the sourceable spend. What are you going after with a project? And that can be at the business level, can be category wide, or it can be within a certain segment. When you think about the scope of a category strategy or category management, you're really looking at a full natural category across the business. What's the complete category across all business units, across all areas of spend. Things like, you think about how you engage with stakeholders on a typical sourcing project. Again, the focus there is more on the project level. You may engage with a stakeholder to develop a project, and execute on that project all the way through the results, as opposed to a category strategy development and category management, which we think is really more of an ongoing relationship and a partnership. So kind of that ongoing long-term nature. And that's similar to kind of the horizon that you think about. A sourcing project horizon, you may think in terms of a 1 year or the contract length. You're going to put a sourcing project in place so that results in a 2 or 3 year contract. So the focus of that project is on the contract length, as opposed to category management. You're thinking long-term planning, and that should be at least 3 to 5 years, maybe longer, depending on the needs of the category. So hopefully that adds a little more color to the question.
Fantastic answer. Well, from my perspective, hopefully our listeners will be very engaged on that one. But unfortunately, I've got another one for you, Chris, but I'm sure you're up for it. Stakeholder management is, of course, such a key part of great category management, but the reputation of procurement in our business is such that it can be hard to engage, let alone excite stakeholders. What tips do you have for building real engagement and selling the dream?
The dream. I love it. Hey, this is a difficult topic, and certainly one we could spend a whole several hours on, just digging. I would say, so typical that you may be approaching a stakeholder group for the first time, or your relationship from a procurement organization may have been more from a less strategic approach. So really you're kind of starting from a position of not having much strategic engagement. So a couple things I think about here is how can you start to bring some nuggets of value to your stakeholders. It certainly helps for you to get well grounded in your category, from a spend standpoint, from an overall needs, spend some time and do some market research, for example, and then try to bring some key insights out of that, and bring those nuggets to your stakeholders. Show them something that they haven't seen before. Reveal something about the category. Maybe they're focused within their business unit, but don't understand some of the other trends that are happening across the business, or what's happening in the marketplace that can impact them and can influence their strategy. So think about that. Again, this is a journey. So think about this as a long-term investment that you want to make, and how can you start to bring some of those little nuggets of value. Spend time with them, as we've talked about previously, just understanding their business. I think a lot of times people just like to hear that you're interested in them and their business and their objectives, and not coming at them with this objective of driving procurement savings, but really try to sit down with them and say, tell me about your business. I'm here to listen. I want to understand, help me to understand what's important to you and how I can help.
Thank you for that. And I guess following on from that, Christophe, someone has asked, what seed should we start planting with our stakeholders for better category management in 2018?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was just on mute.
No, you're right. I think just following on from talking about stakeholders, one of our listeners has asked, what seeds should we start planting with our stakeholders for better category management in 2018?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, well, before I answer the question, I want to reiterate what Chris said before is, in order to plant the seed, and I want to insist on the networking and on the link that you have with the business, and understand what they're looking for, so you can really answer their needs. But that's, I'd say, one of the seed is really to continue to sell the process, the category management process itself, to highlight the value and the benefit that the process can bring, and sell that really once you have understood their strategy, that you are here to align the purchasing strategy to their business strategy, so that hopefully you're going to deliver full value for what they want to achieve.
Chris, back to you. Let's take this question. Developing deep category knowledge is obviously important if I'm going to be successful in managing my new category. I've come from outside the procurement team. Where do you think the best sources of market intelligence, preferably for free, they add, come from?
Yeah, free sometimes you get what you pay for. But I think we see this more and more common. We talked about some of the skill sets that are required for category management, and we see more and more organizations hiring from outside the organization, hiring from other functions within procurement. So this is actually more common, and we actually find that it's pretty beneficial to help break that mindset, where someone coming in fresh with a fresh perspective, maybe you come from a commercial background, and you can really bring a fresh perspective without that history of the how we've done things in the past. So from our mindset theme here, I think that can be very beneficial. Now, to your question on what are some sources, and we talked about some of these already, but there are a lot of good sources, and I think if you're coming in new to a category or new to procurement, I would start approaching this again as a journey. This is not something to tackle all at once, but start building your network. Networking is absolutely critical, and this applies internally as well as external to the organization. So first of all, think internally. Certainly there are people within the organization who have background on that category, whether that's within the business, whether that's former procurement professionals who've been working in that category. But also think externally. You have networking organizations like Procurious and others who can link you up to other category managers, make connections, build some relationships. Start to try to build those bridges and connections to other category managers and other organizations, other industries even that are tackling the same type of categories, and start sharing stories. There are other industry groups. You mentioned Procurious is a good one. Leverage the assets online here in terms of what you can find and the networking opportunities. There are other groups like the ISM, Institute for Supply Management Sourcing Interest Group here in the U.S. Procurement Leaders is another good one. So there's a lot of good resources out there and industry groups to start to get connected with, to build that network and build those connections. There are also other different conferences. So different providers have conferences that you can participate in. They're always interested to have practitioners join those conferences, many times, without having to pay a registration fee. And the last one I would highlight is suppliers. Never overlook the expertise and market intelligence that you have from your supply base. And that when I say that, it sounds like, of course, that sounds completely obvious, but I think that's an area that many organizations overlook. Spend time with suppliers. Go schedule time with them. Ask them about what's happening in the market. Ask them what their perspective is on what's coming down, in the next 5 to 10 years. I guarantee you, the most will be very willing to spend time with you and share their insights.
Yeah, that's something I really agree with too, Chris. I think it's one of the great things that procurement can bring into the business is all that external knowledge that really helps feed business strategy, because, I mean, the whole idea of business strategy is to understand what, your competitors are doing and what's happening in the business landscape. And, the kind of information that procurement is exposed to can really help business leaders fine-tune the overall business strategy. So I couldn't agree more there. Look, we've just got 2 last questions and then that will be it for today. Christophe, a lady has asked us, our company has just embarked on strategic procurement. The employees who were managed this in the past are not supportive. How do you get around this so that they become team players? Some of them have worked in their roles for over 20 years.
Yes, actually, that lady is asking a great question and a difficult one to address. I'd say mainly this needs to be managed through change management. And let me explain what's under change management here. I think, first of all, it's very important to communicate very clearly throughout the program what you're trying to achieve, so that the whole organization understands what's happening, and you can communicate about a lot of different topics. What are the success of the program? What are the issues with the program? How can we improve? So I don't think you can really over-communicate here. But a second thing, which is very, very critical, is that people, they need to understand it's a top-down approach. So it's coming from the purchasing management, and that's something that they need to do, and it's they have to adapt and deliver against. Another thing that you really need to approach with a very strong program is training. So we mentioned several types of training, but help them in different aspects of how they can understand the process, how they can sell their business case. There's a lot of things you can do through training. Another thing that can help as well is to work on skill sets. So maybe matching their skill set with the skill set which is needed for that new activity, understand the gaps, and again put together some development plan for those people. And I'll conclude on saying that not everybody is gonna adapt to the new system. So you've got people that will not. So you're going to have to manage that people development aspect as well with those people that cannot adapt to that new way of working.
Thank you, Christophe. Great advice there. Now, look, we did have one question, but I think we're going to have to leave that for our next webinar, Chris. Someone had asked, how do you see future scenarios? Will the category manager be supported by AI, and will the operational part be fully transferred to bots? So I think that could be a great topic for our next webinar. So I'd like to say one final thank you to all of our speakers today, Alpar, Christophe and Christopher. If you'd like to listen to this webinar again or share it with your colleagues and peers, it will be available via the Procurious Learning area from tomorrow. If you're joining us live today, you'll be able to see some listener feedback questions pop up on your screens. We'd love for you to tell us what you thought of today's webinar. If you have any further questions for our speakers, please don't hesitate to ask them in our discussion board, and we'll ensure it gets answered for you. Following our discussion, I hope you're feeling inspired and motivated to break the cycle of Groundhog Day and embrace a true category management mindset. Many thanks for joining us today.